You're watching a moment where words may matter more than missiles. Here's the question hanging over the Middle East tonight. When a US president openly threatens to strike Iran again, and Tehran promises a response that will leave its enemies regretful, are we drifting toward deterrence or sliding back into war? One number frames the stakes immediately. A 12-day conflict just months ago killed more than 1,100 Iranians and nearly 30 Israelis, and neither side believes the last chapter has been written. If this confrontation escalates, the rules of the region change fast. Another round of strikes would not look like a limited exchange. It would reshape nuclear diplomacy, redraw red lines on missile development, and test whether American power still restrains conflict or accelerates it. If it de-escalates, the question becomes whether fear, rather than trust, is now the only thing holding the peace together. And if it fails entirely, the shockwaves would not stop at Iran's borders. They would hit energy markets, regional alliances, and fragile global stability all at once. To understand why this moment is so combustible, you have to step back from the headlines and look at the deeper structure of the standoff. The United States and Iran have been locked in strategic hostility for decades, but the core disputes have always revolved around two things: nuclear capability and regional power projection. Israel has consistently framed Iran's missile program as an existential threat, while Washington has traditionally focused on preventing Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. What's new now is that these two concerns are merging into a single pressure campaign. That shift became unmistakable after Donald Trump met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Florida. The public messaging that followed closely mirrored Israel's long-standing position that Iran's missile capabilities are as dangerous as its nuclear infrastructure. Until now, Washington had largely avoided threatening direct action against Iran's missile program. Crossing that line signals something important. You're seeing US strategy move closer to Israeli threat perception than at any point in recent years. Iran's response was immediate and defiant. President Masoud Pezeshkian made it clear that Tehran views any new strike as unacceptable aggression and that retaliation would be severe. This wasn't just rhetoric for domestic consumption, it was a reminder that Iran now frames its confrontation with the United States, Israel, and parts of Europe as a single, interconnected struggle rather than isolated disputes. In Tehran's narrative, this is no longer about one program or one sanction regime. It is about survival under sustained pressure. The recent history explains why neither side trusts the other's assurances. Just months ago, a 12-day war tore through Iran and Israel. According to conflict monitoring data, Israel carried out nearly 360 strikes across 27 Iranian provinces. Those strikes hit military bases, missile facilities, nuclear-linked sites, and government buildings. The damage was severe. An estimated 1,000 Iranian ballistic missiles destroyed, more than 30 senior commanders killed, and at least 11 nuclear scientists eliminated. Iran responded by firing over 500 missiles toward Israel, with dozens landing in populated areas. Despite that scale, the war ended without regime collapse, without mass protests, and without a decisive strategic victory for either side. That outcome matters. It reinforced a dangerous lesson for all players involved. Massive force did not break Iran's internal cohesion, but it also did not eliminate its capacity to rebuild. Here's where intelligence assessments complicate the picture. US intelligence agencies and the UN's nuclear watchdog had found no evidence that Iran was actively producing nuclear weapons before the June strikes. Tehran has consistently claimed its nuclear activities are civilian. Even after the attacks, experts argue that Iran may have hidden enriched uranium stockpiles and could resume parts of its nuclear program within months if it chose to. That uncertainty is exactly what fuels Washington and Tel Aviv's anxiety. At the same time, Iranian officials insist the country is now militarily stronger, not weaker. Pezeshkian has publicly argued that Iran's forces have improved in both equipment and manpower since the ceasefire. Whether that's fully true or partly strategic messaging, the signal is clear. Iran wants its adversaries to believe deterrence still holds. So what happens next depends on choices that haven't been made yet. Consider one scenario. What if the United States follows through on its warning and launches limited strikes on Iranian missile facilities? Even if those strikes are precise and short, Iran would face immense pressure to respond. That response might not be a direct attack on US assets. Instead, it could come through regional proxies, cyber operations, or disruptions to shipping lanes in the Gulf. The immediate result would be higher oil prices, market volatility, and renewed insecurity across the Middle East. Now, consider a different path. What if Iran accelerates rebuilding its missile stockpile without openly breaching nuclear thresholds? That would force Washington and Israel into a dilemma: act militarily and risk regional war, or tolerate a stronger Iran and accept a weakened deterrence posture. Either choice carries costs, and both would reshape alliance politics from the Gulf to Europe. The ripple effects extend far beyond the Middle East. In South Asia, heightened US-Iran tensions complicate already fragile balances. Pakistan, which maintains ties with both Washington and Tehran, would be forced into careful diplomatic maneuvering. India, heavily dependent on stable energy flows, would watch oil prices and shipping security with growing concern. Any disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would be felt immediately across Asian economies. Globally, this standoff tests the credibility of American power. Threats without follow-through weaken deterrence. Action without strategy risks escalation. Allies are watching to see whether US policy is driven by long-term objectives or reactive signaling. Rivals are watching to see whether pressure produces restraint or defiance. What makes this moment especially volatile is the collapse of trust. After years of broken agreements, abandoned deals, and shifting red lines, every statement is interpreted through the lens of worst-case assumptions. Iran assumes threats are precursors to attack. Washington assumes rebuilding equals provocation. Israel assumes delay equals danger. In that environment, even restraint can be misread as weakness. The deeper question, though, is about power itself. Military dominance does not always translate into political control. The June War proved that overwhelming force can destroy infrastructure without reshaping intent. It also showed that survival, rather than victory, can be enough to claim success. As you watch this story unfold, pay attention to what doesn't happen as much as what does. Watch whether inspectors return, whether indirect talks resume, whether missile tests stay quiet or resume loudly. These signals will tell you more about the future than any press conference. Because in tonight's Middle East, the most dangerous moment isn't the strike itself. It's the silence right before someone decides they can't afford to wait any longer.